Hello, welcome to Advocata Studio, and we are just to start another interesting conversation about Sri Lanka's economy, but mainly the economic activity that is taking place and the potential of the economic activity in the northern east. And we are joined and we are honored to join with Mr. Rajendra Theagarajah. Mr. Theagarajah, thank you very much for joining us
My
and
pleasure.
welcome to our office and our studio.
Thank you very much, Dhananath.
Just wanted to start the conversation. You have been working some projects over the north and east for the last few years. I don't know, probably for decades. Give us some flavor of what's happening, because after the conflict, it's now more than about 10, 12 years. How is the life, coming to normalcy, and what is the potential that you see? What is the flavor there?
So I think to put it in the context, the north and the east collectively accounts for 8 districts. And collectively, they account for around 29% of the land and coastline mass. Roughly 3.75 million people, which is around 17% of the nation's population, has contributed just under 15% of GDP, right? But of that 15%, around 10% is from the east, and the northern province is just 4%. So you can see the least of the developed of the 9 provinces, in my opinion, has probably the highest upside, right? From a
Yeah.
contextual point of view, of course, yes, the 30 years of conflict has had its scars, but I think now we are almost 15 years post conclusion. And I think the provinces are coming back, definitely. People are picking up the threads and activity tends to go on. But I think if at all, the biggest issue is the ability and the mindset of the provinces wanting to integrate with the remaining 7 provinces in the country, which is so important for supply chain connectivity, especially when before you go outside the country, you first need to get into the country. And it's happening now, but I think there is more and more. I think it's a two-way, it takes 2 to tango. But I think in that context, I see not only an opportunity for people from outside wanting to support this growth, but for also people from the other parts of the country to benefit from the resource base in these 2 provinces for the betterment of their own businesses as well as from a nation building perspective.
Mr. Agarada, now one of the economic theories which says is, especially when you have a diaspora, there are 2 types of diasporas. One is like you are left forever. You even don't want to take a look at it where you came from. And there's another diaspora who lives outside, but your heart is always here, or like in whatever their country that they groomed up with. So I feel the diaspora who left, the diaspora now in Canada and in these western parts and many other parts of the world, is their heart is still somewhat in this country. So in that context, it's while having that, it's sad to hear that only 4% is what the contribution to the national economy from the northern province. So, what sectors do you see has the potential, and how should we make it happen?
So if I pick, probably the low-hanging fruits would be 4 to 5 sectors. I would say education is very important, and maybe in a moment I'll say why in each of these cases. Education, smart health, renewable energy, and agri fisheries are 4 of the sectors which I think are worthy of engagement. And let me briefly touch on each. If you look at education, if I look at the north alone, of the 1.3 million residents in the 5 districts, I think 2 years ago, less than 200,000 were attending primary and secondary school. but less than 9,000 entered university. So then you can ask yourself, where is the future proofing of youth? So there is very much a low hanging fruit of getting into supporting vocational certification, non-state based private sector education. Whole range is available, because if you don't have a smart citizen, you can't make it a productive province. That's point one. If you look at the health side, again, just picking some stats from one of the central bank reports recently. Again, if I look at the north, you had, I think, 2 years ago, just over 2.3 million outpatient visits during the year, and about 330,000 inpatient visits, supported by just 4,400 hospital beds, with one teaching hospital, 24 district hospitals, and 187 rural hospital stroke clinics. So you can see the natural congestion between outpatients and
The
inpatient,
patients.
and the natural tendency for everything, including a mild flu or a cold, you go to the hospital and you stress that system. And I think there is a huge opportunity to digitize the patient's records in the province, and also get into a whole series of preventive healthcare as opposed to the patient healthcare. Because the more you get into prevention, the need for inpatient and visiting hospitals is not there. And also, you strengthen the productivity of the citizen. So I think there, and this is happening in other parts of the world, and our community is doing this. For example, in the UK, this model is already working with smart health. In fact, health tech, there are a few Sri Lankan Tamils who are now engaging with the National Health Service, providing this sort of preventive care where the government is paying for it. So there is also a natural opportunity when we keep on grumbling that the deployment of the budget on healthcare and education is scarce. But if
Yeah.
you take that scarce resource and maybe productively deploy it more towards prevention rather than cure, I think it can be far more opportunity.
So your suggestion is to first digitize and have a program for prevention rather than cure for the northern province
I
mainly.
think there is an opportunity.
There's an opportunity.
Then you look at the third area, which is agri and fisheries. Yes, with the amount of waterways and the coastline and the land mass, there is very much an opportunity. Again, if I just pick the north, which has the lower amount of GDP, I think there were about 330,000 households in the northern province, of which around one third is in the agri space. And I believe that that 100,000 households, they account for around 20% of the agri landmass,
Right.
right? But of that, 57% was engaged in paddy,
Right.
5% was in fruit,
Okay.
and only 3% was in vegetables. So again, something tells me very often we are doing what the neighbor is doing. It's the herd mentality. There is very little data driven
Approach.
focus, and I don't think this economic sector is really looking at, can we change the mix? Is there better productivity? Is there more revenue? And I think this is where the engagement from overseas also and the private sector can come in to harness that resource base more productively, not only for the province but also for the country, because we are still importing stuff, and also to be a part of an export oriented agri and fisheries on that side. On the fisheries itself, I think there is a lot of stuff which is taking place, but very much the primary fish gets shipped out. There is very little processing and preservation. And this, I think, addresses another issue which we have always complained. And COVID was the best example. When we turned back and said there was, with COVID and the crisis, there was a fuel issue, there was a transport issue, and suddenly you had from Zambulla to wherever people were throwing surplus crops saying can't transport, no guaranteed price. Now, that whole thing is because there is very little capacity built on storage and of processed preservation. But if you, the opportunity in my humble opinion is not just to come and invest more into plantations, but to get into those two areas where you then give the opportunity, because land is fragmented in this part, right? So you give the opportunity for those small scale farmers to upscale themselves, because they all don't have the money to get into capex. But you get into like a software as a service, you provide on a hub and spoke these services. They are also able to get a better price for their produce and a longer shelf life if they get into the processing side, better packaging and preserving. So there's price stability.
Understood. So you basically spoke about the healthcare system and the
Education.
agriculture and the fisheries.
And also renewables definitely is one, because if I look at again more than the east, the north, of the 5 districts, Jaffna is the most populated, but if I look at the other four, sunfall and wind patterns are probably the strongest in the country. There is some amount of wind being harvested now in that Mana coast, but there is still a lot we can do. And if you look at solar, especially in the Vanni, Kilnochi districts, the sunfall is so strong. To me, there is a huge upside on two sides. If we look at the 330 odd thousand households, again around 60% is only in the district of Jaffna alone. And I think the rooftop solarization has hardly been touched. So there is a very much an opportunity of either investing in rooftop, or if you have for diaspora, if they want to channel philanthropy, instead of just giving every day something, you solarize your beneficiary and you improve their household income to do that. Or third, if you want to get into a commercial business, go into a revenue share with the rooftop. That model has been practiced elsewhere. There's an opportunity. And of course, the ground mounted. Ground mounted, there is still, but of course, there are some policy interventions needed to get that, to attract the dollars to come in. But if the policy interventions are shaped in a manner which attracts, I see no reason as to why the diaspora could not be engaged in that sector to actually make the province itself self-sustaining renewables. There's a big opportunity, but there are a few interventions needed for that.
Mr. Yakaraja, I would like to come one by one. Now, when it comes to the healthcare system, I understand your approach. Now, if you recall, before Lanka Hospital became Lanka Hospital, when it was Apollo, there was a lot of patients came from Maldives for treatment. I'm just asking out of curiosity because of the connectivity with India. Now there was a conversation of a ferry. Now, is there opportunity or space? So, like you take your approach on prevention and on digitization, if there's an opportunity for a better healthcare system because of the closer proximity that we can attract, make it like a more revenue generating venture for private investors. I'm just asking on that sector, is it an option?
So it is one possible option, but let's be also mindful that the closest district or part of India to the north is Kerala, more than Tamil Nadu. And if you look at Kerala, the amount of private care, which the health tourism has gone to a different level. Also, because you have a huge expatriate community and you have a lot of Kerala Indians of Kerala origin who are now living and working abroad, who have invested in the country, wanting to come back and support this system. But let me tell you what is possible for the North. I think you probably have, of the 800 or so thousand Tamil speaking people who have probably gone away since the mid 2000s, probably 40 or 50% of that comes from the northern province. And if you look at that cluster alone, and a typical northerner or the easterner, STEM education has been in their DNA, and the number of doctors from that community is probably second to none, and most of them have gone and done pretty well in other parts of the world. And I think there is a huge opportunity if the policy is encouraged for them to upscale existing healthcare infrastructure or actually to get involved in new infrastructure. Because just look at most of them who have private healthcare, whether it's dental or medical, say in the UK, Europe, or wherever it is, with the same healthcare, private care, it's global cover. If you come back to your homeland and do your healthcare, it's probably at maybe one third or maybe 30-40%. You do it in an environment which is conducive. The patient care, the after surgery care, if it is with the mindset of our people, it can be a very powerful thing. But it certainly requires some intervention at government level to actually make this work.
Ms. Yagrada, what sort of a policy are you talking about? Is it the visa issue? Is it the land issue? Is it the business registration issue? What's the issue?
So effectively, it is two things. One is ease of doing business. Definitely, I mean that itself encompasses a whole series of factors which makes
Understood.
one to say it's worth me putting my buck. But the second thing is also land. I think is a secondary thing because I mean, what can you do? Can you take the land and go somewhere else? As long as the ability to lease, there's a framework that is fine. But I think more importantly, the confidence has to come in that if I bring my money and I invest it, it's hassle free and there is continuity in policy. At some stage, if I do make some money, I'm able to do what I want with it and I'm not restricted. I think that message has to go out. So I think it's a communication issue. And obviously, there has to be some sort of policy done to do that. Now, if I take on the healthcare, health tourism, in addition to the surgery type thing, if I look at the home care and the elderly care, we are already seeing people investing in the north. I'm aware of at least one group of investors led by a doctor from Switzerland, another entrepreneur from Norway, and a couple of other investors from London, all of Tamil speaking origin. I think they have bought a fairly large chunk of land close to the islands in the north, and I think they are putting an entire elderly care, chalet type concept, entirely privately funded, with a common entertainment, a common in-house healthcare, the laundry, central kitchen, the whole work. So it's just like Europe. And
Right.
I recently saw on again TikTok one of the main promoters as to why he wanted to do this. The guy said, "I went at the age of what late 20s as a nomad, and after 45 years, I want to come back to my land, and I want to invest in something to deliver the same type of lifestyle I would have if I was in Norway." So that mindset is still there if we tap the right mindset.
But this is very interesting because as Sri Lankans, we always wanted to develop and development, but we are completely, we have forgotten a key sector which has the highest potential. Not only the potential, the money and the skill set are both with them. And this was a theory by even Professor Ricardo Hausmann. He said that's, the diaspora is what you need to tap because they have money and the know-how both. And especially in this case, north and eastern provinces has the highest capacity because that's the least developed. So then you have that emotional
Absolutely.
connection as well, that I have to give something back. Just moving from healthcare to agriculture and fisheries, let's come to agriculture. So you mentioned that there's a herd mentality. About 50+% is on paddy and only 3% is in vegetables. About, if I remember right, 8% in fruits.
18 fruit and 3 in veg. Yeah.
18 fruit, yeah. So what can be done, because again when it comes to paddy, there's a conversation right now, people are asking why the rice prices are so high, so on and so forth. But what can be done? Is it because of the, or in terms of modernization, what else? And also, from my little knowledge, we use paddy basically as rice, but there are multiple options that you do with paddy and rice. You produce perfume, you produce beer, you produce antioxidant, so many things. What is the potential on that stretch?
So there are two things. One is the opportunity of collaborating. It's a PPP, right? In terms of knowledge, I think there is enough university talent available in the two provinces, but the opportunity is to connect with the knowledge and entrepreneurship, so that you bring in the R&D locally developed, and you that's an opportunity to continue to foster that. The second thing is, look at data science before you look at even the paddy itself. You look at the soil, you look at the water, you look at the sunfall, and say, for this particular land, is what you are currently growing the optimum, or is there something quite different? If I give you one example as a layman, if you look at that Punerian belt, which is just off the A9 as you pass Vavania and Kilnochi, more towards the west part of the country, the orange or red soil is apparently very fertile for low GI rice,
Right.
which is mainly for people with sugar and diabetes, right? But you ask yourself how much is actually grown there in relation to what you're normally doing. I think it gives you the answer. Now, I know of somebody whom I have met in the UK, who's one of the most prominent distributor across the UK of dry rations, dry goods.
Okay.
And he supplies to literally all the high-end health, like Holland and Barrett's and, Tesco's, the big names. And he has his own brand on low GI. But when I ask him from where do you source, he says from Kerala and Vietnam. And when
Right.
I asked him why not here, so he says consistency, there's no consistent quantity and quality. So the buying power is there
Yeah.
as an example, but it's about connecting and then wanting to do something competitively priced to do that. So this whole thing of supply chain is absolutely important. So that's on one side. But if I look at and tell you of something else which is happening on the paddy space, a lot of them think that you need to have rice mills to do this, and then there is this whole engagement about the concentration of mills
Yeah.
in one part of the country. But if you really look at, there's another segment of smallholders who are not too worried about that. They are engaging in their own small scale, straight to mill from the paddy, rice flour, not rice.
Okay.
And that's sent today to Scandinavia, to Europe, to the UK, Canada. It's been couriered and it's sent out, right? And there's a huge market for that. Now, I'm also aware of at least one NGO which started as a charity for orphans 25 years ago in the Mena district. Today, actually has a mill in Kilnochi, and they have their own brand which sends the rice flour. You can get it in East Ham or Manor Park in London. It goes straight to one distributor and they push it to all the Asian households. And that NGO today is cash positive, not
Right.
dependent on handouts anymore. So it's because analytics, science, and they're connecting the beneficiaries from the original support system and the market. And if an NGO initially starting to look at orphanages can do this, I think anybody else can do this if the mindset is there.
Understood. Coming to fisheries, sorry, before that, also on the vegetables and fruits, and also on for all three sectors, paddy, vegetables, and fruits. I also want to discuss about the land issue because everyone wants the technology to come into the paddy field, but when you go to lease a land, when you want a collateral, you have been in the banking sector. This is pretty much next to impossible.
So let me tell you also on technology. See, it's not everybody who is going to be able to afford technology in land because the reality in Sri Lanka is agri land is fragmented. Unlike tea,
Yeah.
even tea is fragmented. So there is only a source. When you don't have the scale advantage, your economic viability of investing in capex becomes a question. So that's when you have an opportunity for the hub and spoke. Now, I recently in one of my visits, I went deep into the Valley, in the former conflict area, and I met a young guy who was an IT guy who was invested in a industrial dryer, a large scale dryer to mill paddy.
Right.
And when I asked him, is this going to Jaffna? He said, no, I am supplying the surrounding maybe 10, 15 kilometers radius of all the small scale guys who have from half an acre to 2 acre of paddy. They come to me. I operate two shifts of activities. So they pay a particular price, X number of rupees per kilo. They get their paddy into rice flour, they pack it and then send it out. These are all guys sending it out. So
Right.
they don't have the need for to invest in that technology and infrastructure because somebody has seen the sweet spot to provide that like a software as a service, drying as a service, right? That's one example. The other example is you have if you go to the that part of the country on the A9, once you get off the A9, you will see on the road paddy strewn all over the road for vehicles to go for the drying.
Yeah.
Drying. Now that has the negative impact of whether it is nails, rust, God knows what else, right? But when you get into drying scientifically using an industrial dryer, you get a much better quality. And if you are using the labor to come and do the drying like that, you have to pay, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 rupees a day. If it rains, the guy doesn't work, you have still got to pay him, right? Then your cost still goes up when it comes to your kilo of output. But if you dry, you don't have that dependency on weather. You go to the hub, your local hub, get your job done. So there is a huge opportunity. That is in a smaller scale.
Yes.
But in a slightly larger scale, there is a huge opportunity for entrepreneurship to set up small to medium scale agri parks.
Right.
We heard about this story, I think, about a decade ago in one of the budget speeches. Somebody announced and said like industrial parks, we're going to open 5 agri
Agree part.
parks. As far as I'm aware, we have not seen the birth of one of them, right? And I think there's a huge opportunity in these areas. If you bring in, you're not talking about 1,000 hectares, you bring in a couple of 100 acres, or maybe even less than that. Start small, and then you look at serving the local, the thousands of smallholders. Now, if they want to experiment on a new type of seed or a new application of fertilizer, you give them small plots within your park to come and experiment. Then you bring in your technology like your IoT devices or drones or it's all in one place. You connect with the local university so that you offer all those services like a software as a service per unit of application. So it's a win-win on both sides for the park operator as well as the local community. So I think that is one thing which we should actively look at in deploying technology in this space.
Interesting. Also on vegetables and fruits, because still I think on public perception they know the mangoes from Jaffna is good, and many other, we can give hundreds of examples. What should be done?
So again, preservation, processing, and certification. Yes, when you speak about the Jaffna mango, we know about the famous Karuta Kolumban and the Sembatan, which is very well known. But will you believe if I tell you now, the sweeter variety which we get from the south and the north central, the TJ
Yeah,
variety,
Alphonsus, that, or the TJ, yeah,
TJ, right?
yeah,
Tamil, right?
yeah.
After him. Will you believe that now we have TJ mangoes grown and harvested in the north, in the peninsula, and exported to Europe and to
Wow,
London,
wow,
right? That is happening now, right? Again, smaller scale yet, but entrepreneurs who have come from overseas, I know of this, they have invested in also getting their EU certification, FDA certification. They have understood the importance of the barriers of entry, what they need to comply, and they have gone and done that. At least I know one guy who has done that successfully, and now he has also got into a major local FMCG distribution network where his product is being rebranded as the Jaffna mango, not the TJ.
right,
Jaffna. So it's actually in um, of one of the big outlet distribution outlet which has about 500 outlets in the country. You can guess who it is.
yeah.
I think he has initially got space in about 50 or about 10% of the to brand and display his own Jaffna brand. So that is
Just
in
out of curiosity, is there a difference in taste? Because I have heard because of the soil
the
composition.
soil and the water makes a difference, right? But the difference is, you and I both know the harvest is only for a period,
Yeah,
and for how long can you keep a mango normally?
yeah,
Certain. But this guy has brought in technology from Australia and Coimbatore, and now he has got into pulping, right?
right.
And now he has also got into deep freezing.
Okay,
Deep freezing the pulp. So if you say no, the normally we say okay, if you don't have it in this 2 month season, you don't enjoy a good mango. But now, I mean, I actually have this deep frozen pulp in my fridge at home,
right.
right? You can have the same taste 365 days of the year. You take it off your fridge, it's deep frozen. You put water, or if you want to have it as a part of a cocktail, you put your drink, and you have it as fresh as you get. So that is the value of technology in processing and preservation. Now, when you also look at the processing is value addition, but the preservation is your shelf life of the mango has been stretched now
Wow.
for maybe 1-2 years. The same way, the opportunity of whether it is cassava, whether it is pepper, whether it is mango, getting from the basic fruit into chips. Or sometimes the same mango chip or the banana chip, which goes into your cereal, has a lifespan of about 5 years. But the same banana, which you grow in the deep south or in the north, if you don't consume it in a week, it's gone, right? So
Yeah,
this is the plot I think one needs to recognize. The more you process in a proper manner and more you preserve, you then a become less dependent on price volatility,
absolutely,
climate, as well as you are more independent in terms of the market you get.
absolutely. On economic terms, also, as you very correctly said, that you bring the
Absolutely.
price volatility down, because otherwise the farmers, everyone cultivates mango or something, and then the market,
And then why do you want to grumble about the lack of guaranteed price?
yeah, absolutely.
You guarantee the price
Right.
after that, once you are
Absolutely.
able to preserve, right?
Correct. Excellent. So we spoke about, I think, mainly on the agriculture and healthcare. I also want to touch upon the other two areas that you spoke about, on the fisheries, because this is another interesting conversation. We had some numbers on it because of the protein requirement, and my chairman Murtaza speaks about this often, because that helps to make a healthier nation, probably to, in few decades time or few generations time, to produce good athletes, uh, gold medals in Olympics. That requires a lot of protein on our population. So, but sadly, the situation is, while we this is a conversation, going back to many decades, that okay, you have the ocean around, you're an island around you, but you are still struggling to get your protein content right. Again, I think the same principles apply on preservation and on improving productivity. But I would like to speak about what is happening at the moment. Also, we all know there's a bit of a difficult situation on the northern sea with India and the fishermen, and often conflicts. How do you managing on two aspects? One is on improving productivity, but also managing the geopolitical tensions on this particular area.
So yes, the geopolitics issue has been there and it's continuing to be there. That's something, I guess, it's a challenge and an opportunity for both countries to get into a more productive discussion and look at how collaboration can take place, and also maybe earmark your terrain. But fisheries is not only about fishing in that particular space. If you look at for the northerner and the easterner, it is theoretically from north of Kalpitia on the other side up to Ampare,
Yeah.
right? And then you have a whole myriad of inland waterways and reservoirs. So there is really the opportunity of fresh farming as well as ocean farming, right? But I think still a lot of the stuff goes from the ocean or the waterway straight to the market as fresh. There is still a less preservation taking place as far as I know. At least from the north, I know of at least a few companies who are now exporting direct to at least Europe, and I think one or two are doing straight to the States and Canada. But then that has its own set of logistical challenges. But there are a couple who have done very well. There is at least one. There are two I know. One which has the benefit of a lot of private equity from outside the province, including Colombo, which is a $1 million business now and done very well, sourcing from that part of the world. But the other one is a homegrown native business, which today exports. I think they source from about 15 to 16,000 fishermen, small scale fishermen, across the northwest and northeastern coastlines. They collect every day. I've been into that factory. They freeze, pack to the overseas markets, and they've done very well for themselves. Everything from your cuttlefish to prawns to crabs to they do it. And this guy started as a fisherman at the age of 16, no education. Now it's second generation, but he has gone to that and he has done this through the conflict era, and now he has literally doubled his capacity and gone to a different level. So the will is there as far as your conventional fishing is concerned. But I think there is a bit more, like you said, the R&D element, and then the extraction of protein and getting into more value addition. There is still less opportunity there. So I think that's where I think engagement with people from of Tamil speaking origin from overseas can maybe also bring what they are used to in that part of the world and maybe investment opportunities. That's probably there. But if I, touching on protein, if I give you another example, there is a particular variety of seaweed which has protein value, right?
Yeah.
And also it is what they call, one aspect is protein, the other one is a substitute for gelatin,
Right. Yes.
right? And this is mainly for vegans as well as for those who are vegetarian. Now, I'm aware of one company, a small SME, for which there has been investment from Colombo as well as the US. They are exporting seaweed, packed and processed for this particular market, to California.
Wow.
So it is happening. But they started with the market. They started with the opportunities of the
Okay.
market and they work backwards. So I think the people who start that way, looking at the market and then look at engaging the value chain on a backward, probably are able to scale up faster than the other way around. And another area which is worth mentioning as far as the overall definition of fishing is sea cucumber. Now, there has been this whole thing about the harm to the ocean and the waterways as well. But I think now, as far as I'm aware, NARA and a few other state agencies have brought in a good framework as to defining what is called wild sea cucumber farming on one side and the safe harvesting and safe farming using inland lagoons as and also defining spaces which are suitable for long lease. And I think that is as long as that regulation paves the way for safe and effective sea cucumber, it's a huge export opportunity. And I think the north and the east is blessed with the waterways to do that. And I think more and more people can do it. At the moment, a lot are doing it as small scale farming, but most of the processing is happening either in Nigambu or it's happening in Matakulia. So I
Right.
think there is still the opportunity to retain, create and retain more value in the two provinces by investing in the processing also and packaging in the provinces.
Ms. Yagarada, excellent insights, and I wasn't aware so much activity is taking place in these two areas. Before I come to tourism and I think the Kankasanturi port and many other sectors, now what is the sentiment of the diaspora coming and investing? And you mentioned about it's all about confidence, building confidence, and making sure that you can easily invest, and after you make money, you are free to do what you want to do with it. What is stopping them, or what making them coming back? Could you give some thoughts so then we can, or are there any particular policies that you're looking at on changing the particular ones? I understand it's overall on the ease of doing business, but are there any, like, very painful ones that really need to change, and if you do that minor change, you basically considering a big potential?
So one of the most important things is for someone to have the belief that if I bring my sterling or dollars and I put it in theory, there was a framework that you open a particular inward investment account, you put, convert, do what you're doing, you can take it out when you want.
Yeah.
Maybe for the right or wrong reasons, post 2022, we had a challenge, but that itself definitely would have put people on the back foot to say, if I can't take my money out, it's my money, not borrowing locally. Why do I have other options, right? So that's point one. The second thing is, even if the situation has improved now, I think that communication has to go out, back out there into the world to say things have stabilized. And if we are encouraging investment, you should be able to take what you invest and reap. So that is a very important degree of confidence. And the second thing is, okay, the various policies regarding local taxes and etc. It's a perennial conversation, but I think there has to be some message about consistency. As long as people know that if I am going to bring my money and invest, and for 5 years I have reasonable certainty, then I factor in that as a cost and to make sure that the business is viable. But if you have jump starts every 6 months or a year, it really becomes a
Yep.
challenge for them, because these people have other options available, right? The Of course, the other sentiment, of course, about the political aspect of it, I think, hopefully, at least from when I look at public domain, the sentiment I'm seeing now is a more open sentiment, and I think hopefully, if everything post November, we might see more and more positivity being viewed by the diaspora outside wanting to engage. But regardless of all that, we have still seen with all this negative sentiment, people have been investing. All you have to do is to go on some of the arterial roads in the province and see the florification of wedding halls,
Right.
right? Like if you go on the Nigambu stretch, you look at the wedding halls and the the big ones. The equal number, the similar florification is happening in the northern province. And these are people who have come from overseas and put their money, and they are taken a call on it, and there is a demand for it. So there is no question about that. And increasingly, you're seeing people also investing in very high quality homes. So people are investing back. It's not
Yeah.
that nobody, I mean, if you really travel or if you care to look at YouTube, you can see some of the YouTube clips of some of the new houses which have been built there. So people are doing it.
Investing in that their home means that they really want to come back and stay. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I said about the home care and the elderly care thing is happening. So I think it will continue. But one thing which I think will make it even easier is, okay, it's good that we opened up the Jaffna International Airport or made it an international airport, and now we are seeing, I think, a couple of flights. I think it's the Alliance Air and Indigo is now
Yeah.
coming. But I think more. I think one needs to look at this more. And the more you do that, the opportunity for someone to connect, even if they can't directly connect to Jaffna, the more they can come to Chennai or Cochin or Hyderabad and fly back. And that's happening today. People will, if they have nothing, no reason to come to Colombo, I think there would be increased throughput direct to their place of origin and where they want to spend time. And that itself will, I think, give a greater affinity to want to do business back home.
And also given the transport challenge from Colombo to Jaffna, because we have the train, but it is
Absolutely.
not that it's time consuming. It's so easier
So,
for
so
them to.
on that, one thing I would like to stress is, what do you do with this airport? So one can always say that is an infrastructural cost and it's a drain on the country, and you already have three, four international airports. But I want to give you a simple example of how you can enjoy. There's already a tried and tested model here
Right.
where diaspora has been successfully engaged.
Okay.
You look at the Cochin International Airport, the second airport, right? 1993, they did the initial draft. They completed the airport phase one in 1997, and today it's been what, 27 years, right? They started with, I think, 200,000 square feet. Today it's 2.5 million square feet. Last year it processed 10.5 million passengers, right? Mainly of Kerala origin. And you know what that guy did? It was done as a private-public partnership. So it's right. It goes as, I think, Cochin CILA, Cochin International Aviation Limited, CIAL, right? 33% is owned by the government of India. I think some of the scheduled banks have about another 6 or 7%. A few Indian companies like Air India, Bharat Petroleum has about another 10, but 38% is owned by private sector. And at that time, when they raised the money, the then chief minister, this is a communist state, who went to the Middle East and did a roadshow, and they raised a bond
Right.
for more than 10,000 non resident Indians from almost 30 countries. invested in that bond. This was 20 years ago. Why is that? They communicated and say, why come to Madras, Tamil Nadu, or why come to Hyderabad? Come straight to your homeland, right? If that can happen in Cochin, I see no reason why that can't happen here. And today, there are more than 25 airlines connecting 31 international destinations out of Cochin. And it's reported to be the fifth most intense in terms of international traffic in India over 20 years, right? It won't happen overnight, but somebody has to start somewhere. But this is a living example of a PPP to engage the diaspora.
Excellent. So we hope that this will take off. Finally, I want to come on the renewable energy side, which you spoke about, and also there's a big conversation. You mentioned about the solar fall and the windfall, and we all aware what's happening in Mana. Um Tell us a little bit about it. How do you see on financing? Is it purely through the diaspora, or are there any options, any financing models with your background?
So I know that the big one which is taking place in the MENA with our neighbor is more of a quasi G2G. It's
Yeah,
coming as a FDI.
yeah,
That's a different scale. I think it's 1,000 megawatts. And I think regardless of politics, engaging that sort of investment is important because that scale, if you really want to get into that level and really harness the province's energy, I think you need to get to that sort of a scale because that itself will feed the smaller support system. But if you look at the slightly smaller ones, even if you get before you get to the 10, 20 kilowatts, the small ones, if you look at even the 100 megawatts, there are a few taking place. I think one recently opened, that's 100 or 150 megawatt with one plant in Batiklo, I think, and one was in the Mana district. That was structured by Sri Lankans, private equity. There was definitely technical and a lot of advice and support given by some members of the diaspora based in London, and they got some good quality development capital from Scandinavia. I think they raised about 100 or $150 million. So that's a decent size project which just got kicked off, I think, in the last year. As an example, it took a few years, but so that's an example of what is possible if you engage and encourage the diaspora support, but you also need one or two anchor local people to give sponsorship to that. So that's important. But this, on a slightly smaller scale, there is enough terrain there to harness the wind as well as the solar because as somebody told me about 4 or 5 years ago after one of my Ceylon chamber conferences, former minister from India, he came and told me, Tia, wind today, which is not harnessed today, is wasted tomorrow. Similarly, sunshine, which comes and embraces you today, if you don't, goes off tomorrow. So, what are you trying to hold on to this here? Why don't you make it open? Somebody will come and take it. And if there is adequate harnessing of this renewable, which you can't take, if your country can't take, your neighbor will take. And that is exactly what they have done. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in Nepal, Bhutan, a few countries like that, the hydro
yeah.
investments have taken place with one large investor agreeing to buy back. So I think if the geopolitics is negotiated constructively to make sure that we are not at a disadvantage, having that sort of a strong buying power can also alleviate some of the challenges for our own infrastructure. And remember something, that sort of encouragement is important because a number of our successful Tamil members of the diaspora have already gone and invested in India in a big way because they have seen the opportunity
Amazing.
and they have been invited. So as long as the same encouragement is shaped in a constructive policy dialogue, the confidence will come. And again, if I slightly deviate from the energy side on education, on health,
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether you're aware of there are Sri Lankans living in Canada who have invested in medical schools in the West Indies.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, and if I look at, I think it's Dominican Republic or one of the couple of other ones. You have, I think, 5 or 6 overseas medical universities, and there are 3 or 4 which are owned and operated by Indians, but at least one of them is owned by Tamil from Canada, and they are catering to an international audience and including the surplus demand from India. So in India, there is a huge mismatch between the annual number of students applying for medical colleges and the number of inputs. And that's why this proliferation of overseas campuses in countries like some of the West Indian countries are taking place, because when they qualify, they don't remain in those countries and demand to get jobs in those countries. They go back to other countries or come back to India, and the National Medical Council in India accredits the campus. And if we also don't look at this with fear, without uh, worrying about our system being threatened, if you are allowing somebody else to come, make use of our land, bring resources, investment, bring your students. And once you're finished training, you go back. Why not? So it is an opportunity, but I think the policymakers, see, that can be an ideal PPP, but I think the policy, I think we need to think about it slightly broader and make sure we open.
This is an excellent example. I wasn't aware of that Sri Lankan Tamils have been investing in West Indies on these medical facilities. I think we could have, and especially it's in a way quite sad that they are investing in India, but we couldn't attract them while they had the emotional connection to us. My final two sectors are also on the KK sport and also on tourism and the water sports. What can be done, because I'm not sure the general tourist route is not touching the Jaffna region. It's going to Al Nuarelia and the Pico Trail and all that. So what are the developments and what can be done to attract more tourists, which has a longer tail value chain, as well as on micro and small medium enterprises, so on and so forth, a more spillover effect. What are your
So
thoughts?
if you look at the waterways, there are 2 things which are slowly happening. One is dragon boat racing and kayaking.
Okay.
I think the National Association of Kayaking and Canoeing launched the dragon boat races in 2021 in the
Right.
north, right?
Okay.
Now it's an annual thing. You can actually go to YouTube, you can see the stuff. And this year, the 8th National Canoeing Competition took place in Delft.
Right.
So it's actually happening, and it's a partnership. Sri Lanka Navy has played a major role. I think the Lifeguards Association has done something. Local entrepreneurship has come in. And you see, when that sort of thing happens, the dragon boat is so popular in Kerala, right? So now it has come to Sri Lanka as well, it's come to the north. I see no reason why that sort of thing. So if you can actually have, the surfing in the east, you have this sort of thing in the north is possible. And also when you, depending on the time of the year, typically April and July, August tends to be 2 seasons when a lot of Sri Lankans of Tamil-speaking origin come back to the country for the temple festivals.
Right.
April, you have a whole series of temple festivals, and then the famous Nallur festival is in July, August. I think some few 100,000 come, right?
Yeah.
So when they come to the province, very often you bring in your kids, kith and kin. The younger ones have very little to do. So if you really want to attract the younger ones with the parents doing whatever they are doing, entertainment is important, right? So then bringing this sort of competitions, having this sort of activity makes it more interesting for the kids wanting to come here. If not, they have a choice to go elsewhere. And that is what also continues to connect the community from generation to generation to want to support this. Because this inward remittance game, in my humble opinion, was a much wanted need when the conflict went off. Was there. But now that there isn't a conflict, I think the monthly standing orders which kept on coming from wherever it is, I think the next generation is asking mom and dad, why are you sending? Why can't they work? So I see that tailing off. And the only way you can continue to attract the interest is to engage the next generation wanting to do something. So entertainment is one critical element in this space. And also that can create and open a whole variety of opportunities for the micro and SME smallholders in terms of food, gifts, support system, local transport. A lot of things can it can be a part of an ecosystem if that sort of thing takes place. So it is happening, but I think we can slowly encourage it more. But the airport is important to
Absolutely.
make connectivity easy.
And my final few questions. So there's already a conversation between the connectivity of India and Sri Lanka on one side, and the ferry service. I'm not sure whether it's operating.
It's happening from, I think it's happening from Vizag to uh, Jaffna, KKS. I think it's happening. The guy who developed this is a Sri Lankan Tamil chartered accountant who is based out of Singapore. I think they're doing it 2 times or thrice a week, I think.
Right. And that connectivity on the energy sector, there's a conversation about a land bridge, and at the same time on the telco and on the electricity. And I think what you we have also spoken about it quite openly, that the potential that if we can generate extra energy, that we can have the connectivity. And even I think the CEB and many energy experts have opinionated that it's the right thing to do, because you are an island. In case of a connectivity issue, either you can sell it, you have to connect to a bigger market. That's how these economics work. What are your final thoughts on that connectivity? What are the pros and cons that you see? Because of course, we are generally Sri Lankans, when you come to an investment, you have those fearful sentiments. Okay, some money is going to come and take us over, and so many things. How is the sentiment, especially in the northern province to begin with, because they are the first line of stakeholders? And as a businessman, as a former finance expert, banker, how do you see the industries could grow from this potential connectivity?
My personal opinion always has been Sri Lanka is a very small island, almost like Singapore. And the only way you can proliferate is if you are having the openness to connect with the rest of the world. So all what we speak about domestic protection is important, but if we don't have the will to internationally trade and internationally connect, you're not going. In the long term, you can't sustain that. So in that context, having a land bridge while you're looking at the airports and seaports, I think this is right next to us, what, 30 kilometers?
Yeah.
So it's to me is one of the real low hanging fruits if we can encourage that. And that same road is also able to connect the power cables and maybe the telecom. Telecom, you already have CMAV, the cabling. So that's and you are a part of a much bigger equation. And actually, if you look at CMAV, I think SLT got involved initially, but now I think we have got from CMAV 1 to CMAV 6.
Yeah.
And I'm told the market cap of CMAV 6, the new vehicle, is running into billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And even though we may only be, I don't know, 2% or 3% owner, the value of that investment is somewhere else. The same way, I can't see no reason as to why we can't be more open to the bridge, because that traffic can really make a big difference to movement of goods and people. Yes, if there is a concern about people movement and whatever else, that is a factor for the policymakers and lawmakers to be strong enough to have a focused discussion with their counterparts and make sure it works. Right?
Yeah.
If you look at what's happening now in Hong Kong, the bridge with Macau, what that has done now with the mainland China, with all the geopolitics, you can see how Macau is fortificating. Similarly, with the Channel Tunnel, you can see, okay, despite Britain going away from the Union, what that is doing in terms of traffic, in terms of goods and services. So I think there is a huge opportunity that this connectivity can do, because that country, that in terms of 1.4 billion people, you throw a stone or a pin, right? The opportunity is there. It's about how you harness that. And one final parting thought I would like to also leave is this importance of capacity building for the government, in addition to the in engaging diaspora. You see, a number of our guys, people have really done very well in local government and parts of roles as mayors and councillors in very developed cities and districts around the world. New Zealand, Australia, Norway, Sweden, and now I think Switzerland as well you have, and Canada. So the whole concept of twinning, forget money, right? You connect, say, the best example I can give you is the city of Southampton, which is in south of England. About 3 years ago, did a twinning with the city of Mumbai,
Right.
right, during Prime Minister Modi's time, and you can see what that would have done in terms of connecting the two cities. Like that, there are several examples of twinning arrangements where you are able to exchange best practices in terms of infrastructure, policy, leave alone FDI, so that you don't grumble saying that we are at a different level of less developed in terms of policy initiatives. The best practices are out there. It's about how you can make use by twinning. Twinning is just asking somebody, right?
Yeah.
And given that we also have people of Sri Lankan origin now in various um, uh, local government and townships in this sort of capacity, reaching out and asking, I think, is a very good opportunity to build the resilience to support business.
Thank you, Mr. Theagaraja. Any final thoughts, that anything that I forgot to ask,
The
anything that...
final thought is, it's an aspiration, I think, for all of us, as well as those we spoke about the diaspora. 1.2, 1.3 million people living and benefiting from almost 14% of the waterway and land base in the country, contributing to less than 4% of GDP. I think the vision should be by 2030 we should aspire to cross 10%. And that is how we should embrace the diaspora, and that is how the opportunity should be looked at. This is definitely a doable thing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Theagaraja. Just want to bring context why Advocata is engaging in this conversation, because our vision and mission is creating a lawful Sri Lanka that where anyone could succeed without their caste, creed, or ethnicity or religion, through free trade and purely through hard work. And that's what we exactly believe, and that's the reason why we wanted to integrate with everyone and make sure that the country moves from this step to the next step. And that's our vision, and that's what we stand for. But also, to do that, we have to based on facts and figures and do the policy based on a scientific way, and that's what we stand for. And thank you so much for bringing that perfect combination of data, facts, and to an extent policy and the potential. And congratulations also with all the work that you are doing in the north and east, and hopefully we will be able to see the fruits of what you are doing in near future. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, and thank you very much for having me on the show.
Thank you very much. Please subscribe us. We are available in English in Advocata Institute, and you can watch our singular content on Advocata Plus. and we are also available on Advocata Kural in Tamil language, and we are also available in TikTok, in Instagram, in any social media platform in all 3 languages. So please make sure to follow us and subscribe us and engage, and also please go and comment what type of conversations, what type of policies that you want us to engage and research more, which we will be able to interact more and do research and direct the country in the right direction, again based on facts and figures. And we believe that all Sri Lankans has to come together regardless of their ethnicity, caste, creed or religion, and we all have to work together to take Sri Lanka a better place that everyone want to invest and live, and we all can collectively improve our standard of living. Thank you very much. We'll see you in another video next week.